Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 673. Today is September 6th, 2024, and I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. Got a lot of news to get through on today's episode of the show, but first want to mention the sponsor of the show, and that is the Expat Money Summit 2024, the world's largest offshore event taking place entirely online from October 7th through the 11th. There will be a lot of great speakers at the event, including Scott Horton, Tom Woods, and Dr. Ron Paul. Myself, Dave DeCamp, and Hervoya Morik will be on a VIP panel about World War III. Is it fear-mongering or a genuine concern? So if you would like your complimentary ticket to the event, head on over to expatmoneysummit.com. Again, that's expatmoneysummit.com, or click through from the link in the show notes page. Additionally, if you want a VIP ticket to the event, you can save $100 by using the promo code Kyle, that's Kyle, at checkout. And again, there is a link in the show notes page for that. All right, one more announcement, and that is this will be the last episode of the show for 2 weeks. I am taking a not too long, but a nice 2 weeks off as paternity leave. My wife is expecting, and the baby should be born sometime over the next few days. And so, yeah, I'm going to take a couple weeks off to enjoy the, first couple weeks of her life with her and my wife. So I really appreciate it. I've gotten a lot of really nice comments from listeners congratulating me and, saying that it's no big deal that I'm taking a couple weeks off. So I really do appreciate that, guys. And with that, I guess we should get into the show today. You could, find the show at YouTube, Rumble, and Odysee for the video version. It's up anywhere you can listen to audio podcast. The Libertarian Institute hosts the show, and we repost it on the blog at antiwar.com. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at KyleAnzalone_, where if, anything in my schedule changes, I'll be back sooner or later than I initially thought. I will post any updates on Twitter. All right, with that, let's get into the news today. First story up here is from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. U.S. takes action over new claims of Russian election interference. So the Biden administration on Wednesday took several actions over new unsubstantiated claims about Russian election interference. Most of the actions targeted employees of RT, a Russian state-funded media outlet. The U.S. has accused RT of interfering in presidential elections since 2016, but what the U.S. called interference has just been the media outlet's coverage of the election cycle. CNN reported on Wednesday that the administration was preparing to unveil several steps against election interference, and RT's spokesperson told the outlet 2016 called and it wants its cliches back. Later in the day, the State Department announced it was taking 3 actions to hinder the malicious actors from using Kremlin-supported media as a cover to conduct covert influence activities that target U.S. elections in 2024 and undermine our democratic institutions. The first action was imposed by the Treasury Department, and it was visa restrictions, and the restrictions targeted 10 Russian individuals, including 7 RT employees. The State Department also said it was listing the Russian media group Rosha Sogodana and its subsidiaries as foreign missions. The subsidiaries RIA Novosati, RT, TV Novosati, Ruptly, and Sputnik. The third action announced by the State Department was offering up to $10 million as a reward for information on the hacking group known as Russian Angry Hackers Did It, or RAHDIT. The State Department claimed that the group previously engaged in election influence in other countries and is a threat to the 2024 U.S. elections. Separately, the Department of Justice unveiled an indictment against 2 employees of RT who are accused of funding a Tennessee-based digital media group. The Department of Justice alleged that the 2 Russians covertly funded the groups to distribute content with hidden Russian government messaging. The DOJ did not name the group, but in the details in the indictment match with Tenet Media. The indictment charges 2 Russians with conspiracy to launder money and conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, a law that requires individuals or entities engaging in lobbying or other activity on behalf of a foreign government to register as agents of that foreign government with the Department of Justice. Since both Russians are based in Russia, the case is not expected to go to trial, making the indictment largely symbolic. The U.S. government is also going after Americans who have written or worked for or written stories for RT, including former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter, who was recently raided by the FBI. Ritter said the raid was over allegations that he violated FARA, which he has denied. And so my guess is this is going to be a major story that unfolds over probably up until election day, so the next 2 months, but maybe even longer than that, depending if Trump wins the elections or not. But if he does, I assume it's going to almost be like another Russiagate following his 2016 victory. This seems like a big deal and something we want to keep our eyes on, and a real opportunity for the White House to crack down on speech that, they're initially going to say, oh, it's amplifying the Russian narrative, but it's really going to be speech that undermines Kamala Harris's chance at an election victory. All right, next up here. Putin says Ukraine's Kursk offensive failed to distract Russia from the Donbass. So Russian President Vladimir Putin said Thursday that Ukraine's invasion of Russia's Kursk Oblast has failed to distract Russian forces from the front lines in Ukraine's eastern Donbass region, where Russia continues to make steady gains. So Putin said the goal of the enemy's goal was to make us nervous and worry and transfer troops from one sector to another and to stop our offensive in key areas, primarily in the Donbass. Did it work or no? No, Putin said. And so this was when the initial invasion of Kursk happened. This was my interpretation of it, that what the Ukrainians were trying to do were trying to get Russia to pull forces away from the front lines in the Donetsk. I did think that was going to work. I thought Russia would do everything possible to expel the Ukrainians from Kursk as soon as possible. I thought it would look like a real black eye for Vladimir Putin, a real embarrassment for his administration and the Russian military, and they would look to vanquish the Ukrainians within a matter of days, if not weeks. However, the Ukrainians have been in Kursk for over a month, and the Russians still continue to seem more interested in taking territory in the Donbass than just merely driving out the Ukrainians as soon as possible. So Dave writes in his article, Russian forces have been making more rapid gains in Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast since Ukraine launched its invasion of Kursk on August 6th. Russian advances in August marked Moscow's biggest territorial gains in Ukraine since October of 2022. Putin explained, the enemy weakened itself in key areas and our troops accelerated offensive operations. Most importantly, no actions are taking place to contain our offensive. So Russian forces have been closing in on the Donetsk city of Pokrovsk, which serves as a key hub for the Ukrainian military. The city authorities ordered civilians to evacuate the city, and according to the New York Times, the last evacuation train left this week. More than 26,000 civilians, including 1,000 children, have been forced to flee. Ukrainian officials have said one purpose of the Kursk offensive was to gain territory that could be used as leverage in future peace talks. However, in response to the invasion, Putin and other Russian officials ruled out peace talks. On Thursday, Putin suggested he was still somewhat open to negotiations, though. Are we ready to negotiate with them? We have never refused to do so. However, not on the basis of some ethereal demands, but on the basis of the document that we agreed upon and inked in Istanbul. And so that Putin is still saying that he's willing to go back to the Istanbul agreement is interesting, because Russia has suggested that that is now in the past, particularly after the Kursk offensive, but really throughout this summer, Russia seemed to have moved on from that agreement, and that they were going to settle the score with Ukraine on the battlefield by taking Ukrainian territory, not necessarily through a negotiated settlement. So when Putin is talking about Istanbul. He's referring to talks between Russia and Ukraine that were held in Istanbul in March of 2022. At the time, a peace deal was on the table, but discouraged by the U.S. and its Western allies, who encouraged Ukraine to fight, which Zelensky agreed to do. And now Ukraine has found itself in quite the horrible situation. All right, everybody, next up here, U.S. wants to deploy controversial missile system to Japan. So the U.S. wants to deploy a previously banned missile system to Japan for military drills. The Typhoon missile launcher is a ground-based system that can fire nuclear-capable Tomahawk missiles, which have a range of more than 1,000 miles. Ground-based missiles with a range between 310 and 3,400 miles were banned under the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF Treaty, which the U.S. withdrew from in 2019. The Typhoon also fires SM-6 missiles, which can hit targets up to 290 miles away. The deployment of the Typhoon system to the Philippines for military drills happened a few months ago, and a move that China viewed as a major provocation. The missile systems were sent to the Philippines for several months. It was first deployed for drills that started in April, and Manila said they would be pulled out in September, meaning they could still be there. The Philippines and China expressed very dramatic alarm over the deployment of the Typhoon system. The Philippines said China expressed very dramatic alarm over the deployment of the Typhoon system. The Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson said the deployment put the entire region under the fire of the United States and brought huge risks of war to the region. The U.S. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth said on Wednesday that she told Japanese officials that the U.S. wanted to deploy the Typhoon to Japan next. We made our interest in this very clear with the Japanese self-defense forces, she said at a defense news conference in Virginia. She said that the U.S. would also look to keep it in Japan for several months. Our goal in the Army has been to really try to have as much combat credible capability forward in the Indo-Pacific west of the international date line, she said. Now, the reason this is concerning is what the Chinese said. We want as much forward military combat capability that we could possibly have. And they said they want that, say, east of Hawaii or something like that. The Americans would be appalled and would be extremely concerned that China is ramping up for a war with the U.S. But here we're doing this just off a Chinese coast in waters that are the South China Sea and the East China Sea. We are putting these right within China's near abroad, and I think China is going to have a major reaction to this. Now, it's important to remember that these Typhoon launcher systems are covert. They're designed in a 40-foot long shipping container, and so the missiles are loaded up in there, and you cannot have any idea where they are. These are highly provocative, highly dangerous. So Wormuth claimed that the deployment strengthens deterrence in the region and said the missile systems has gotten the attention of China. She said there is a lot of potential for moving U.S. troops and equipment around Japan's southwestern islands, which are near Taiwan. U.S. officials say it is building up the military presence near China in the name of deterrence, but the steps have only escalated tensions in the region, making conflict more likely. Wormuth and other U.S. officials are also openly planning for direct confrontation with China, with the obvious risk of nuclear war. Wormuth said last year that the U.S. is preparing to fight and win a war with China. She said, "I am personally not of the view that the amphibious invasion of Taiwan is imminent, but we are obviously have to prepare to fight and win that war." And so these are just absolutely ludicrous things to say, and absolutely needless provocations that the Biden administration continues to undertake, even though how they could fight a war against China when they're already struggling to continue to arm Israel and fight the war in Ukraine seems a little bit concerning. All right, next up here, Trump says if Harris wins, Israel will no longer exist. And what a statement from President Donald Trump here. After the debate with Joe Biden, and particularly after the assassination attempt, it seemed there was no possible way Trump was going to lose the upcoming election in November. But the Trump 2024 campaign just doesn't hit like the 2016 campaign does. I think in 2016, Trump may have had the wherewithal to understand the division in the Democratic Party, and that when he's calling Harris and Schumer Palestinians and saying that Joe Biden is a bad Palestinian, that this really isn't rhetoric that rings with the American people. The American people know that the Biden administration has been endlessly supporting the government in Israel. And so it's really interesting that Trump has taken this approach. And you wonder if maybe in his older age, he misses some of the nuance that he was able to understand a decade ago. So Trump says if Harris wins, Israel will no longer exist. Former President Donald Trump addressed the Republican Jewish coalition on Thursday and claimed that if Vice President Kamala Harris wins in November, Israel will no longer exist. Trump said, if Harris wins, terrorist armies will wage an unceasing war to drive Jews out of the Holy Land. He told the conference attendees that they should tell other Jewish Americans to support Harris, not to vote for her. They have no idea what they're getting into as she becomes president. Israel will no longer exist, Trump said. Harris has been a part of an administration that has provided a consistent flow of weapons support to Israel's genocidal war in Gaza. She also pledged that the arms shipments will continue if she's president, but Trump and other Republicans have accused her and President Biden of abandoning Israel. In his speech, Trump signaled that he would provide strong support for Israel's onslaught in Gaza. He said, I will support Israel's right to win its war on terror. We have to win, and we will win it fast. Trump also bragged about the steps he took to support Israel during his time in office, including moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and recognizing the Israeli annexation of the Golan Heights from Syria, making the U.S. the only country to do so. He said, I got it done in 15 minutes. They were negotiating it for 52 years. Nothing was getting done without me. The former president said Jewish Americans who don't vote for him should get their head examined, something he said repeatedly while on the campaign trail. And this is a Trump quote, I don't understand how anybody can support them. And I say it consistently, if you support them and you're Jewish, you have to get your head examined. And a lot of people point out that this is a lot like Trump saying the Biden, if you ain't black, if you had to question if you're voting for me or Donald Trump, Trump is saying here, you ain't Jewish if you have to question whether you're voting for me or Joe Biden. And of course, the difference between the two on this issue is really small. And in some respects, I think that the way the politics in America plays out, Biden actually ends up being more supportive of Israel than Trump would be. I think Trump would face, and I've said this throughout the conflict, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm making a prediction based on a reality that we will never live in, right? But I think that if Trump were president in 2023, when the October 7th attack happens, that Israel does, and with a blank check from Trump, destroys northern Gaza and maybe drives all the Palestinians to the southern half of the Gaza Strip. But I do think there's meaningful political resistance, including from Democrats in Congress and the mainstream liberals in America, over Trump backing what is a genocide of a Muslim Arab population. I just don't think, with the narrative and the rhetoric coming out of the liberals over the past 4-6 years about how much of a threat Trump was to the Muslims, to brown people, to minorities, they could have ever let Trump get away with something like this. Again, I think Trump would have been full throated support for Israel and would have said Israel could destroy the entire northern half of the Gaza Strip, something that Israel has done. I just think Trump would have cut them off at some point. He would have had to, because of the political pressure in America, that people would have been talking 24/7 about the genocide in Gaza. Hell, CNN may have had a death counter ticker on their website, similar to how they did against COVID, but rather, it's largely been ignored over the past 11 months here, because the Republicans don't care about the Palestinians, and MSNBC and CNN just care about covering for Joe Biden. So it remains to be seen what will happen once Trump becomes president. It is quite a bit different now than had he been president on October 7th, because Israel will be 15 months or so into their genocidal onslaught by the time Trump were to take office, if he wins in November in January of 2025. And so, I, reining Israel in once the genocide is already 90% complete is going to be, I think, kind of difficult, because Trump is going to give them a green light to do more than Biden did, just by politics of it. And even again, the politics in America push him to end that policy at some point in time. Again, we're already looking 18 months into the genocide at that point that Trump could possibly be stopped. I mean, what is going to be left of Gaza by then? Very, very concerning here. All right, this is an interesting story. Families of American citizens held in Gaza want U.S. to cut a deal with Hamas. So the families of American citizens who are being held hostage in Gaza are asking the U.S. to consider making a unilateral deal with Hamas that wouldn't involve Israel. The families made their request on Sunday during a meeting with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, which came after the Israeli military discovered the bodies of 6 Israeli hostages, including U.S. Israeli citizen Hirsch Goldberg Poland. Sources told NBC News that the U.S. told the families that they would consider every option, but they believe a deal with Hamas that includes Israel is still the best approach. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been sabotaging the chances for a deal by continuing to demand Israeli control of the Gaza-Egypt border, known as the Philadelphia Corridor. After the 6 bodies were recovered from Gaza, families of the dead hostages said Netanyahu was to blame for their deaths for not reaching a deal. The U.S. has refused to put any pressure on Netanyahu to reach a ceasefire and continues to ship weapons to Israel to support the genocidal slaughter in Gaza. And I'm interested in what the families really wanted the U.S. to propose. You wouldn't imagine that the U.S. would have enough leverage over Gaza, over the Palestinians, without involving Israel to actually cut a deal with Hamas. So it's unclear whether the U.S. has anything it could offer Hamas to secure the release of the remaining Americans in Gaza. According to NBC, there are 4 Americans who the U.S. believes are still alive and 3 others believed to be dead. The Biden administration has put together a list of prisoners in the U.S. that Hamas might want to see released, but Hamas's demands are for a ceasefire, Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and the release of Palestinian prisoners. The U.S. could achieve a full hostage deal by threatening to cut off military aid to Israel, which is vital for sustaining military operations in Gaza, but there's no signs that the Biden administration is considered doing that, and in fact, August was one of the busiest months of weapon shipments to Israel throughout the conflict, so really the opposite is happening here. All right, next up, Israeli forces kill 17 more Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Gaza's health ministry said Thursday that Israel's assault on Gaza killed 17 more Palestinians in the previous 12-hour period, bringing the death toll to 40,878. Another 56 Palestinians were wounded, bringing the number of injured Palestinians in Gaza since October 7th to 94,454. Health officials told WAFA that the emergency services are still unable to reach many of the casualties and dead bodies trapped under the rubble or scattered on roads. Israeli strikes were reported across the Gaza Strip as unrelenting violence continues. According to Al Jazeera, Israeli forces are conducting overnight raids in the Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone in central Gaza, which was deemed a permanent safe zone, but has been repeatedly targeted by Israel. Wafa reported 2 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli drone barrage in the areas of northern Rafah in southern Gaza. At least 3 people were killed in an Israeli strike near a school in Gaza City, and casualties were reported in a strike near the Kawal Aldwan Hospital in northern Gaza. The numbers from Gaza Health Ministry are considered to be a low estimate since they don't include the Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead under the rubble, which has previously been estimated to be 10,000, but I'm guessing that number is probably significantly higher. All right, next up here. Amnesty International calls for war crimes probe into Israel's buffer zone. So on Thursday, Amnesty International said Israel's creation of a buffer zone in Gaza should be investigated as war crime since it involved the wanton destruction of all buildings and agricultural land in those areas. Using bulldozers and manually laid explosives, the Israeli military has unlawfully destroyed agricultural land and civilian buildings, razing entire neighborhoods, including homes, schools, and mosques, Amnesty said, adding, by analyzing the satellite imagery and videos posted by Israeli soldiers on social media between October of 2023 and May of 2024, Amnesty International's Crisis Evidence Lab identified newly cleared land along Gaza's eastern border, ranging from approximately 1 kilometer to 1.8 kilometers wide. In some videos, soldiers are seen posing for pictures and toasting in celebration as buildings are demolished in the background. Amnesty's report also said the destruction should be investigated for war crimes of collective punishment, saying systematically destroying civilian objects in retaliation for actions of an armed group may constitute collective punishment and should be investigated as a war crime. Israel's buffer zone, which runs along Gaza's border with Israel, accounts for 16% of the besieged territory's enclave. The Israeli military has carried out similar campaigns of destruction in the Nazarene corridor, which separates northern Gaza from the rest of the strip. Combining the two areas accounts for about 23% of the strip. And again, Israel is doing something similar along the Philadelphia corridor, which separates Gaza from Egypt. And then they're actually setting up a new corridor where they're destroying buildings that's in the northern half of the Gaza Strip, so north in the Nazarene corridor. All right, everybody, wrapping up here, not only for the week, but for the next 2 weeks, Secretary Blinken visits Haiti as U.S.-backed police failed to wrestle control from armed gangs. So Secretary of State Antony Blinken is traveling to Haiti to show support for the U.S.-backed government and Kenyan police in their struggle for legitimacy. As Kenyans have been unable to take Port-au-Prince from gangs and paramilitary groups, the White House is considering changing the status of the mission in Haiti to a UN peacekeeping force. So according to the Washington Post, Blinken's trip to Haiti is an unusual attempt to boost the country's interim leader and deliver a message of support from the U.S.-backed international policing mission that has so far failed to make a significant impact. So after the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse in 2021, the Joe Biden administration backed Ariel Henry's claim to power in Port-au-Prince. Under Henry, Haiti descended into chaos, with paramilitaries and gangs taking control of most of the capital city. In response, the White House and Henry worked out a plan with Nairobi to have armed Kenyans deployed to Haiti to take control from armed groups and transfer it to the U.S.-backed government. However, the plan backfired and gangs shut down the airport in Port-au-Prince while Henry was in Nairobi, inking the deal to have the Kenyan soldiers, which are dubbed police, deployed to Haiti, and he was unable to return to the country. The White House then pulled support from Henry and forced his resignation. Then Washington formed a new government headed by Prime Minister Gary Connolly. Under Connolly, the Kenyan police finally arrived in Haiti with U.S. financing and military equipment. So far, Nairobi's security force has failed to have a major impact on the ground, and Connolly's government has not gained legitimacy among Haitians. With the Haiti policy failing, the White House is seeking to escalate the Kenyan mission to Haiti by declaring the police as official UN peacekeepers. Brian A. Nichols, U.S. Assistant Secretary for Western Hemisphere Affairs, affirmed the Biden administration is considering pursuing that path. He said, "A peacekeeping operation is one of the many ways we could accomplish that, but we are looking at multiple ways." Washington will likely struggle to gain support for a UN peacekeeping mission from both the Security Council and Haitians. Peacekeepers have a dark legacy in Haiti, including a cholera outbreak that killed over 10,000 people and committing rapid acts of sexual violence against women. Additionally, I think the Washington would have a hard time getting the Security Council to go along with their proposal on this, simply because what would it benefit Russia and China, and why wouldn't they want to stifle the U.S. efforts? All right, everybody, that will wrap up the show. Again, not just for a day, but for the next 2 weeks on paternity leave here. So hopefully all goes well with birth, and I will post some updates for you on Twitter, maybe over the weekend, maybe early next week. All right, everybody, thanks so much.